Bitcoin and the possibility that this could be revolutionary and a form of currency for however long, the future. In your opinion, what's the safest and most practical way to store cryptocurrencies? You know, if you lose your keys due to fire, flood, whatever, like it's gone. There's no way to retrieve that. So there's kind
Right.
of there's just complications to all of it and more. Yeah, I've never heard of it, thought about that way, but it's a currency of energy or electricity. I'll have
Right.
to meditate on that one. That's
Hello,
interesting.
everyone. Luke Broyles here, along with a special guest, Stephen. Stephen, thank you for joining, of course. And today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, of course, and just discussion. Bitcoin, why it's better, learning things. Stephen, you can introduce yourself to the extent you want to. Stephen here knows a bit about Bitcoin. He's been in Bitcoin a little bit, and we're going to just talk about it. Hopefully, it's going to be useful to you, Stephen. That's the number one goal. And the number two goal is for it to be useful to everyone in the future who watches us. I think it's a good dynamic when um, people that haven't been in the echo chamber for years ask questions because you guys ground us and help us remember that, oh yeah, most people don't obsess over this, and we can have a real conversation about it. You know what I mean? So anyway, thanks for being
Yep.
willing to do this. Most people aren't willing to come on camera, so thanks.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Luke. My name's Steven, and I live here in Michigan, and I'm a mental health therapist and provider. So I work with a treatment facility, and then I also have a private practice where I meet with clients individually and just address any mental health concerns that they have and substance use disorders. So that's where I'm at is my office, and I work here in Chelsea. Um, but uh, but yeah, I saw you, Luke, in the airport in Montana. So I was on vacation and ran into you. I had just flown into Bozeman, Montana, grabbed my bags, and I'm walking through the airport. And that luggage claim, I see the back of your head, but I know you well enough that I could even recognize you from that. And that was just a cool thing. And you were there, I believe, for a Bitcoin event. So that kind of
Yeah,
spurred this along, which was just super coincidental, but fun to do that. And I've got some questions about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency storage, things like that. And so possibly other people out in the world may have some similar questions. So yeah,
yeah,
that's how it kind of
yeah.
all happened.
That it was a very funny moment. So for those listening, it was me, a friend of mine, Bitcoin friend, and Preston Pish, who were all at the baggage claim at the airport for a Bitcoin event. It was a Bitcoin retreat, and you showed up and you were like, Luke, and I turned around, and I don't know if I told you, Stephen, but there's something with that airport because on the way out, a very long story, but to keep it short, I my card was um, marked for fraud. So I was stuck with only Bitcoin and cash, which of course, in an airport, it's hard to spend both, right? Nobody takes cash, and of course, nobody takes Bitcoin. But anyway, but then the guy right behind me also knew who I was.
No
I'd
way.
never met him before. He's just like, "Oh, you're that Bitcoin guy from the internet." I'm like, "Yeah."
No
So there's
way.
something with that airport. All 80 people in Montana apparently know me. At least we're in the airport. So anyway, but yeah,
It
I'm glad we
helps
ran
that
into
you
each
are a
other.
celebrity. So yeah,
Yes,
you,
what a
you need
quote.
to visit
Yeah,
Montana more often.
yeah, I know. So anyway, yeah, those are great topics: Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and storage. All of
Yeah.
those. So where do you want to start? I don't know. I know you've prepared questions, but I don't know what you prepared. So I'm flying blind. Tell me
Yeah,
what's
just
on your
for
mind. What do you want to talk about?
my own personal curiosity, I'm curious, and maybe your viewers already know this, but what sparked your curiosity or what grabbed you to actually get your first purchase of any cryptocurrency? Was there anyone you talked to? Was it something you read on the internet? I was just kind of
Yeah.
curious how you how you got into this.
Yeah, well, there's a few aspects. This would be many years ago now, but there was a friend of mine who unfortunately we're not in touch very much anymore. But at the time, there was a friend of mine, um, very interesting guy, and he is a young guy, and he had experience in some government agencies. He was like this computer genius, smarter than me, etc. And he had all these stories about how back in the day he was on Tor. If you know what Tor is.
Yeah, I've heard.
You've heard
Yeah,
of it?
yep,
Yeah, okay. So,
yeah,
yeah, so for those who don't know, Tor's like dark web, internet stuff. But anyway, this is like back in 2010, 11, 12, and he had all these stories of Bitcoin back in those days and how he would mine it from his computer and all this stuff. And so he had a bunch of Bitcoin. He sold most of it. But anyway, so that was not my first touch point. That was my first touch point with another person. I had heard about it on the news before, but my
okay,
I'd like to think of myself as a low risk guy. Like I was all in on mutual funds and stocks or whatever.
yeah,
Because I'm like, yeah, I'll young, just let it grow 7% a year or whatever. And so I heard about Bitcoin and I thought, okay, worst case it's a scam, best case it's speculation. I don't really care to know which either it is because either way I'm not gonna buy any, right? It's like if it's a speculation, I don't want it. If it's a scam, I don't want it. So why would I buy it at all, right?
yeah,
But then I met this guy and I was already like trying to learn more about it because I guess just curiosity. But I talked about it more with him, and then I watched maybe half a dozen documentaries or videos about it. And then probably about a year after those things, I learned that people in developing countries buy Bitcoin faster per capita than in developing countries. And that
yep,
really undermined my expectation because I thought, okay, best case it's a speculation. Who has the money for speculations? It's us rich, Western American people, right, in the
society.
developed world. Yeah, right, that have thousands of dollars of excess, you know, fund money, spending capital, whatever year, right? But when I learned that people outside the U.S. were buying it faster per capita than in the U.S., that really subverted my expectations and surprised me. And so then I had the inclination to learn a bit more. And then the more I learned, the more I realized, oh, this is a way we could potentially um, help people indirectly save lives. And I just kept going down that thought process over the course of a couple of years, and I've never really looked back. And so now here I am. But that's how I got into it, kind of a roundabout way over the course of years. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Then I thought
Hmm.
very little of it. And now it's what I do for a living, pretty much all day, every day, most days. So yeah, so that's how I ended up here. A mix of videos, articles, individual people, and a lot of time.
Awesome, very cool. Yeah, I learned about it through a colleague. So I had a friend that a colleague at work, and he was just the Bitcoin guy. It was before it was like mainstream, but he would talk your ear off about Bitcoin, and it was interesting. And the more he shared with me, like the deeper the rabbit hole got, and the more expansive and interesting the idea of blockchain technology, Bitcoin, and the possibility that this could be revolutionary and a form of currency for however long, the future, right? And also, yeah, like to what, as you mentioned, like emerging developing countries that they had adopted this, and this had become like a legitimate like way of exchanging currency. So that kind of
Right.
piqued me. He probably talked to me, like, I mean, we would talk a lot about, I learned and heard a lot about
Yes.
Bitcoin early on from him. Shout out to Dave, by the way. And he probably would talk to me about it for about a year. And he was always like, you should just get in a little bit, just carve out a little from your paycheck and do that and everything. And after about a
Yep.
year, I was like, Dave, you've sold me. You're passionate about this. You're in it. And I saw it as a way as kind of like diversifying your investment portfolio, if you will.
Right.
thought like I'd take a little bit and put it in here, and then just go from there. And he had educated me on HODL from the beginning, which I
Hodl.
don't even
Yeah.
know what it stands for, but basically, buy it and don't sell.
Right.
And so, uh, with my lack of understanding of all the technology and just kind of being overwhelmed and fearful I was going to do something I didn't mean to do, on wrong key press or scams or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just gonna buy this once and put it somewhere to store it. Um, and I know there's a several different ways of storing it.
Yeah.
Some are much more intensive, but some have a lot more security. I was educated on how you can build your own, think like computer, do it off the internet, print
Yeah.
things, uh, put it in, and then bury it basically. Take the keys and put it in a PVC pipe, put, hide it in your house,
Yeah.
bury it in the yard, geocache it somewhere. And
Yeah.
so one thing. And so there was that. And then I learned of some like electronic devices that you could do that. But I didn't want to keep it on, is it Coinbase? Is
Yep.
that one of the trading
Yep.
platforms? Yeah. So I didn't want to keep it on there because I had heard where there had been, I don't know if Coinbase anything had happened to it yet, but I had heard about other trading platforms and what had happened in that. So it was more of a parking spot for my crypto as opposed to a garage. And so I wanted to just get in
Yep.
and get out with that. And so I don't know exactly when I purchased. It was either, I don't think it was 2017. I believe it was 2018. I think it was before 2019 for sure. But how I recall it was I got in the momentum and kind of like it was when my first recognition of like a real surge in society or like the news. I'm sure it was out there well before this, but there was that first hockey stick, where Bitcoin just went up like real hard, in price.
2021,
And
2020,
no, I think this was like 2018, something like that.
2017. Yeah.
2017, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I got excited and I bought that night, and that was the very top of that hockey stick, not where you want to be
Yeah.
when you buy.
Right.
And so after I bought, everyone was like, let's sell. So that's what everyone did. And it came right back down. And the good news is I didn't have any plans to trade it or anything like that. But um,
Yeah.
ever since then, I've just been holding on. And since then, it's been kind of an up and down roller coaster. But for the past couple of years, it's been solidly above what I purchased initially. So, I
Yep.
consider it probably a pretty good investment, in a way. But at the same time, the joke I always made was I'll get this and I don't know where it's going to go, but like when I retire, if this can pay for like eating out or something like that, if I can get like,
Right.
purchase like meals when I retire, from my Bitcoin that I bought when I was young or whatever, I was like, that would be pretty cool type deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, ever since then, I haven't really bought any. I haven't done anything, actually. So I bought and stored it, and I've just been sitting. And every once in a while, just I'm out of curiosity, really, I'll get on, and Google, what's Bitcoin trading for now, and I'll see it, and I'll be like, oh, cool, you know. But
Love it.
but yeah, so
That's
that's how
yeah.
I
That's
got
that's
into it.
great. Yeah, you're well ahead most people in Bitcoin, I would say, by not trading it and by not leaving it on Coinbase. You're already ahead most people, which is it's funny to me because um, most people in Bitcoin say, "Oh, that Stephen guy, he doesn't quote unquote know much," because you're not one of these hyper nerds that's watched a
Yeah,
thousand podcasts or read 50 books about it, right? But yet I've met so many people that are quote unquote well educated, yet still have their Bitcoin on Coinbase because they're not educated or they don't actually believe what they think they believe. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's it's very funny that that you've taken that action. So well, yeah, well done.
Yeah, I definitely confess I am not someone that knows very much about cryptocurrency or
Yeah,
Bitcoin. I would say I know enough to be dangerous, and I have a healthy
yeah,
fear. And really, much of my education came from my buddy Dave, who just, he
right.
really gave me the lowdown on a lot of information, and I wasn't gonna dive in that deep, especially just getting into it. But he convinced me to jump in, and so I did, and then um, yeah, just my
And then it went
strategy.
up.
Everyone's got a different strategy. You could day trade it or whatever, but mine was just set it and forget it and just see what happens
Yeah,
long term. So
yeah.
that's kind of
That's
been my
probably what most people
my
should be doing.
program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So
When
maybe
I
we
when
talk
I
about Bitcoin. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry, I
go
just
ahead.
lied. I was just gonna say maybe we talk about Bitcoin first and then the custody components. I was also just saying that yeah, I think most people should copy you and buy it and forget it and just not just sit on it, right? You know, because you've outperformed most people that have day traded the last 5 years or so. So um, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, there's
So
been
yeah,
times that
what?
I like
Hmm.
out like, I could have taken it, sold it, doubled down. I could have like there was a lot of opportunity to, skillfully do that, but I just without trading much and with just fears of whatever, I just haven't really messed with it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so,
that's good. Yeah. Well, and you have a lot of fun activities in your own life. Like you'd rather do that. Like you don't want to spend the time to learn
I,
all that. You'd rather be doing all the awesome things you're up to.
yeah, and I mean, there's a
Yeah.
whole opportunity there within this that I'm like untouching, but I've got my foot in it. You could
Right.
take this more, but yeah, I don't follow the stock market. I don't watch the news. I'm pretty, as you know, Luke, I enjoy my hobbies. I like being outdoors and spending time with people and doing stuff. And
Yeah.
so that's just more of where I'm at. You can find me out in the woods somewhere if you
Yeah.
want to find
Yeah. And you actually mean it, right? A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't watch the news," but they actually do. But you actually don't. So
that.
so
I haven't had cable.
I very much believe you. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had
Yep.
cable for like 14 years, so everything I learned's like almost through osmosis or like, being in the waiting room somewhere where there's a TV on or something like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. Well, what questions can I answer that maybe are ones you have, but one obviously, you're not trying to go down some sort of obsessive rabbit hole, but maybe
Yeah.
what are the things you'd like to know or learn about that maybe don't go too
Yeah.
far off the deep end?
Well, one of my questions, just like your opinion, your thoughts, is what is the safest way, or I'll say, what is the safest, most practical way of buying, like purchasing cryptocurrency?
Yeah, well, I would say a reputable exchange. I think that's the easiest way. Something similar to Coinbase. I wouldn't use Coinbase, but I don't think I ever used them. I don't even think I've ever bought anything
Hmm.
from them. Maybe I did once, but I don't remember it. But yeah, I would say reputable exchange that has minimal transaction fees and price spreads. Price spreads is also where they really get you. But yeah, minimum transaction fees. River, I think, is a great one. I can send you more information about that after the call, but River would be one of my favorites. There's a few other good ones. Swan's a good one. Strike's a good one. Um, but basically buying somewhere that um, has good uptime, right? Because Coinbase does not have good uptime. Somewhere that has a good reputation, somewhere that's been around for a while, and somewhere
When you
that
say uptime, what do you mean by uptime?
so certain exchanges like Coinbase tend to go down pretty frequently. Like they went down again a week or two ago. So
Okay,
which could be a problem because if you're looking to buy or sell or withdraw, um, when it goes down, that could be a very stressful problem, depending on what you're trying to do and
totally.
how quickly you're trying to do it. So yeah, one that is affordable. Ideally, one with customer care, I think is really important. It's another reason I recommend River, because certain exchanges, again like Coinbase, have essentially zero customer support, which is very, very irritating, especially for people that are high net worth clients, that you can't get in contact with anyone, but you might be in limbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely not recommend Coinbase or Robinhood. But
Okay.
River is a pretty good one, and a few others are good as well.
Good to know. Yeah. All that's news to me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Um, in your opinion, what's the safest and most practical way to store cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, so I don't know how in depth I should go here. But you've taken the self custody before, right? You understand there's the 12 words, right?
Yeah, yeah. So like your keys,
Yeah.
if I recall, like the
Right.
yeah. Yep.
Right, exactly. So, right now, most people that take self-custody have that set of keys for their Bitcoin. What more and more people are doing, and in my opinion, what most people in the future are going to do, is have multiple sets of keys. So, when you have one set of keys, you use those keys to sign a transaction. So that's called a single signature wallet that you have, meaning
Okay.
it takes one signature to sign and approve the transaction. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what a multi-signature is, it is essentially that with multiple, meaning you have multiple sets of words, but it requires multiple of them in order to sign transactions. And so the downside of that is that it's a bit more complicated, and typically it you have to pay for it. To some degree, you have to pay for it. Either that's in time, like you gotta spend dozens of hours learning how to do it, then hundreds of hours over the course of years maintaining it, and probably at least 1,000 hours stressing about maintaining it. So you either got to pay for it in time because it's a good bit more complicated, or you got to pay somebody to help you do it, right? So that's the downside. The upside with that is that the if you do it properly, the odds of you, if, again, emphasis on properly, if you do it properly, the odds
Mhm.
of losing the Bitcoin are down by, it's frankly not even a question. It's way, way, way less likely. So that the way I like to compare it is like, having it in a wallet in your pocket or safe in your home versus like a Swiss bank vault where you have different keys to open it in different locations. So, um, now, longer term, this isn't exactly what you asked, but I think it's important. Longer term, most people will never do that, right? Most people will never have the 12 words to for their Bitcoin. Um,
Mhm.
I believe Bitcoin is going to be used by more and more people in the future. But just the trade-offs of the technology, the way it works, most people will never be able to do that, which I think makes perfect sense because most people will never want to learn to do that. And so if they don't want to learn, they won't. But then also just technically, not everyone can. And so my point in saying that is that um, pretty much everyone who does have the ability to do that is probably going to do some sort of multi-sig because the Bitcoin at that point would probably be worth enough so much that that is the route that would be the most viable, right? Let's say someone has one
Yeah.
Bitcoin, and let's say one Bitcoin is a very, very significant amount of money. Um, you would not want those 12 words in your house or in your safety, quote unquote, deposit box or with your attorney, right? It's like you just don't want those things. If you give it to your attorney, if the attorney's file cabinet gets raided, your Bitcoin's gone. If the attorney's a bad guy, your Bitcoin's gone. If the attorney's assistant is a bad guy, your Bitcoin's gone. If you keep your
Yeah.
Bitcoin, right? You know what I mean? If
Oh,
you keep your
totally.
12 words
Totally.
in, in your apartment, yeah, right. I don't know to what degree you've thought, worried, or reflected on that. Maybe you have a lot, maybe you haven't at all. But there is an seemingly endless numbers of ways that 12 words could be stolen from you because it's just 12 words. But that's what multi-signature, the redundancies of multi-signature aim to reduce.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
much of that makes sense?
100% of it. It just
Right.
becomes more, and that's like why I think I dabble in it as opposed to jumping in because it just gets complex.
Yeah.
There's like all the layers, and if you lose your keys due to fire, flood, whatever, right? You're th at that point, like it's gone. There's no way to retrieve that. So there's kind
Right.
of there's just complications to all of it. And so um
Yeah.
but yeah, the 12
Which,
keys,
yeah.
the password and everything, and storing them different places, all that. Yeah. So I've thought about it. My One of my friends, there's different ways to just be out of the network, and out of it in
Right.
different ways, protect yourself. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, that was the reason why I picked a electronic wallet device. Um, was because, from my
Yeah.
understanding,
You
that
don't
was
want it
only
to get stolen.
somewhere to store it. And yeah, I guess I don't know if that's answered your
Yeah.
question or vice versa, but I have a piggyback question
Yeah.
on that. Is if I have my 12 keywords, but say something, and I have all my crypto loaded onto my wallet device. From my understanding, it's only on that device, right? And so if anything were to happen to that device, would I still be able to access or get my crypto using those 12 security words? Or if that device, is flooded or burns, is it gone because it was literally on that device? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, this is a common misunderstanding. But yeah, it is not on the device. The words are what matter. The device still matters, but the words are much more important. So the number one concern is keeping the seed words safe. That's the number one concern. Another
Okay.
potential risk is if somebody were to have the device and have your PIN to the device, that would be another single point of failure. Of course, they'd have to guess that PIN, and they almost certainly would not be able to guess it correctly. But if you, which I see extremely often, people use like a birth date or social security number or an address for their PIN, um,
Yeah.
then that would be a critical failure point, right? And then the other question
Yeah.
is, was the device corrupted or was it good, right? That's typically the lowest risk of the three. But yeah, technically speaking, for most people that are new, what most people tell them, including myself at times, is that you know protect the device as if the Bitcoin's on it, but it's not on it. It's the words that matter. The device is largely irrelevant. If you lose the device, if the device is destroyed, but you still have the seed words, then the
You're
Bitcoin's
still
fine,
good.
assuming you
And
recover it
that's because of
properly. Yeah,
blockchain
but
technology.
the tr-
Like it's not stored anywhere. It's stored a million little places and in little fragmented amounts or
yeah,
pieces of information,
essentially,
like more or less.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, millions of people have the Bitcoin that is your Bitcoin. Millions of people have it, including me. It's just none of us have access to it. You're the only one that has access to it if you have the key to
Okay,
unlock it, quote unquote, and move it. Right
gotcha.
now, the trade-off of that is that if anyone takes a picture of it, of your seed words, then
Yeah,
it's then it's gone essentially. If you post a picture of 12 seed words anywhere online, even though most people don't know what it is, like 90%, 99%, 97% of people have no idea what 12 seed words are. But the internet is so pervasive and the scammers are so pervasive that you post a picture of 12 seed words anywhere within minutes, some kid with some AI software somewhere is going to find it and
sure.
going to take it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
totally,
um,
exactly.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, it's scary. That's yeah, all that kind of stuff.
It is, but it's the trade-off. It's the trade-off that a lot of people, and I'm not saying that you say this, but a lot of people say, "Oh, this is why it'll never be used." But on the inverse, like I said earlier, most people will never. Most people, I believe, that will use Bitcoin will never encounter this problem in their life because they will never own um, a a large enough portion of a Bitcoin to um, be concerned about this and have the actual seed words. So it's a double-edged sword, right? Most people want the convenience of making money and getting rich or doing whatever, but they don't want the uh, pressure of responsibility of protecting it because it's like, hey, you
Yeah.
want to make a lot of money, but a lot of other people would like that too, and they're not as good-hearted as you, or you would like to think you are, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely a
And it
risk.
only takes one, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah, correct. Yeah, as you can probably imagine, I met a lot of people that think of 99 different attack vectors, but if you miss one, then you miss one, and all it takes is one for the Bitcoin to be confiscated, which is a big part of why I, I'm a big multi-signature, multi-sig proponent, and as you
that
may or
makes
may not know,
sense.
that's what I do for work.
Nope.
But I believe that's the biggest value add. Am I going to add more value by um, telling people news of the day or by helping them sleep well at night, knowing that they're not going to lose it if one bad thing goes wrong? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Good to know.
My name is Luke, and I'm a board member as well as the director of content at the 501c3 nonprofit organization Bitcoin is Better. The mission of Bitcoin is Better is to help the working class as well as people new to Bitcoin better understand Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? How does it work? And why is it important to me and my family? If you find this conversation interesting and you want to learn more about Bitcoin, please go to the website Bitcoin is Better, where you can get hours of free educational resources about Bitcoin as well as numerous articles about Bitcoin. Additionally, if you want to go even further and you're somebody that's new to Bitcoin or pretty curious about getting into Bitcoin, please fill out the application, the link of which is in the description below, where you can apply to join the show as a guest. Have a one-on-one discussion with somebody that can hopefully answer your questions about Bitcoin appropriately. And at the end of the conversation, you will get free Bitcoin as a thank you for your time, your interest, and engagement, and hopefully to propel you on your next steps in your Bitcoin journey. If you are not somebody that is new to Bitcoin, but you've been in Bitcoin a while, still liking and subscribing to this channel and sending these videos to your friends and people new to Bitcoin is something you can do to help the organization. And beyond that, please consider donating. Again, Bitcoin is Better is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Feel free to donate to us, and just a mere couple $100 donation will have a very lasting impact with lots of people new to Bitcoin that impacts many individuals and therefore many families. So please consider sharing this content with people that are new to Bitcoin in your network. Please consider donating so that Bitcoin could be passed on to new orange-pilled people right after a Bitcoin discussion with them. And additionally, beyond that, with the application, again, link in the description below, feel free to have people that you know in your network apply and join. And hopefully these kinds of conversations will be helpful to them as well as many, many viewers to come. Additionally, and finally, if you are new to Bitcoin or been in Bitcoin a while and you want specific support for yourself, one-on-one support, I'm happy to help you, whether it's buying Bitcoin for the first time, buying Bitcoin for the 100th time, taking self-custody, upgrading your Bitcoin tax and legal status, whatever the case. If you need help with Bitcoin, no matter your skill level and no matter how much you're interested in buying, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help. So thank you for your time. Let's get back to the content. But we appreciate you engaging with this content. We appreciate you filling out the application to get free Bitcoin. We appreciate you checking out our free resources. And ultimately, if you feel called to donate to our mission and our cause to accelerate Bitcoin adoption for the working class and to the majority of the world population, which is yet to acquire their first Bitcoin. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Um, since I purchased, I now when I complete my tax forms and things like that, I see there's like a tax requirement for any like purchase or sale of any cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, things like that. I purchased prior to. And so like and I haven't traded or done anything as I mentioned. Like how does that work? Like is that considered income tax? Is it taxed at different rates? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so you don't pay any tax until you sell it. So if you've not, this is another reason why I don't think trading is that wise. If you've not sold it, then you don't have to pay any tax on it. Whenever you make a transaction, or from one place to another, you don't have to pay any tax on it. As of now, there's no unrealized capital gains tax, so you don't pay tax on that. It's just whenever you sell it
Okay.
that you pay tax. If you hold it for more than 1 year, you're going to be paying a lower income tax or capital gains tax than you would if you held it for less than a year. So you don't have to worry
Okay.
about that right now. You only have to worry about that when you sell it. But I think most people will not have to sell it. I think they'll be able to borrow dollars against it in the future if that's what they desire. But
When you say
that's
sell
a
it,
different
like
that's a
what
different
if I were
question
to
for a
like
different
get an
topic.
Uber? Sorry to interrupt you. I guess I was just
Yep, no,
curious
you're good.
the difference between selling your cryptocurrency versus like using it to purchase an Uber ride or a dinner or a Tesla car. Is that selling it or is that like a transaction and that isn't considered something you'd have to do taxes with?
Yeah, they would consider that selling. You should report that
Okay.
on your taxes. If yeah, following the letter of the law, yeah, you would have to report that. Some states
Okay.
and hopefully soon enough the whole country will make amounts under a certain dollar amount as non-taxable. So typically that ranges between like $600 to $1,000 is what they're trying to do. So it might be that in the
Okay.
future it's not taxable if it's under $600 or something like that. But as of now, yeah, you should report that um, to the tax man.
Interesting. All right. Good to know. Um, you mentioned speculation and Bitcoin. Uh, that it's not speculation. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's hard to know even where to begin because, like I said at the beginning, I used to think worst case it's a scam, like maybe it's a Ponzi scheme. I don't know. Years ago, I didn't even know what a
Yeah.
Ponzi scheme was. It's like I don't want to learn. I don't want to deal with it. I know the stock market's not a Ponzi scheme because I've been told it's not. So, I guess, that's fine. But then I thought, okay, best case, it's a speculation, right? That people just buy it and it goes up if more people are willing to pay more, and it goes down if less people are willing to pay more, right? And so, I suppose if one wants to say it's a speculation, maybe it is a speculation, but the way I view it is that it's a speculation that people are going to want the thing in the future the most difficult to reproduce. And so far in history, that is all we've ever done in history. And so maybe it is a speculation. Maybe it's not totally honest to say it's not a speculation, but I think the speculation is that economics as we've known it so far in history just continues, right? So thousands of years ago, salt and wheat was what people desired as money. It's what we traded in. It's what we denominated in trade. And so, why did we do that? We did that because that was a thing everybody wanted. There was consistent demand that was the most difficult to reproduce. It was hard to reproduce wheat and salt, right? And then, thousands of years later, that we have gold, right? And gold um, also is difficult to reproduce. I can't help but wonder back at the time, if we were having this conversation about gold, maybe we could say thousands of years ago, gold is a speculation. Who's going to want gold? You can't eat gold. You can't drink gold. I can at least eat salt and salt and wheat, right? It's like who's going to want this gold thing? But what I think those people would have missed is that the reason people want gold is that it's more difficult to reproduce, than wheat or cows, right? You can have the cows breed. The cows will help you with that. And but you can't do that with gold, right? And then between 400 to 800 years ago, we had more of these political currencies emerge, right? Now the dollar being the dominant one, and that's even more abstract than gold. And the funny thing with that is that it's not more scarce than gold, right? Gold, as you probably know, gold goes up in price, right, as we print more dollars. But the dollar's more decentralized in its defense than gold, right? You have to go through the U.S. Army to take over the dollar. Gold doesn't, have an army. You just have to go
Hmm.
out and dig, right? So anyway, I guess my rambling point is that so far people have saved in the commodity that is the most difficult to reproduce, whether that's political paper, like the dollar, or if that's gold, or if that's food, or if that's houses, right? House prices go up because they're more difficult to reproduce than mortgages. And so Bitcoin is, um, from a computer standpoint, Bitcoin is the most difficult thing to reproduce. And so I think if one's going to speculate on the end of the world as we know it, if one's going to speculate on, um, whether that's economic collapse, population collapse, war, whatever, I think I was going to speculate on that. I think the only thing that makes sense is to buy food and guns and maybe a big plot of land. But even that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Really, you want the food and the guns, and you kind of need both. So, in other words, Steven, you're going to be the only guy that survives. um, but it's
I'll bring
so
a bow and arrow so I don't run out of yeah, we'll have to make bows and arrows and we'll go back to
that's a good point,
caveman tools because even bullets
right?
you'll run out of. So
Yeah, that's
uh,
a very good point. Yeah, and you
everyone's
need
gonna be
bullets.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna go to the library and check out the latest bushcraft book and just take
yeah,
that with me. Uh, learn how to
yeah,
live like a caveman.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, I guess my point is saying that, on the foundation of a speculation, that's the only reasonable outcome, right? If the modern world as we know it ends, then regressing backwards is the only logical step, right? And then on the flip side, I believe that if we, economic and technology speaking, if we progress forwards, then I think we're going to have more computers. I think the future is going to be more digital. I think there's going to be more people. Hopefully, there'll be more economic prosperity. And in that world, the thing that makes the most sense is buy the commodity that's, um, the most difficult to reproduce. And in my view, Bitcoin is that commodity. So anyway, in regards to its speculation, maybe it is a speculation, but I would say, to me at least, it doesn't. I don't buy it because it to me is a speculation. I buy it because to me it's the least speculative thing. So maybe everything's a speculation, but to me, assuming the future is going to continue, assuming computers will continue to exist, and assuming that more people will, want computers and want the commodity that's the most difficult to reproduce, which we have so far, um, that is Bitcoin. I could explain why that is, but long and short, to me that's why I'd rather buy it than stocks or oil or anything else, because everything else is easier to reproduce, um, than Bitcoin.
Interesting. Right on.
Does that make any sense, or any
Oh
thoughts
no,
on that?
I
Or
mean,
no?
yeah, yeah. So my thoughts on that is I totally see how Bitcoin, and that's like where I kind of got onto is like this is kind of, as you mentioned, it went from salt and wheat to the gold standard to dollar bills, and it's
Yeah,
gonna evolve. Like the dollar bill is not gonna be the last, as long as the world keeps spinning, it won't be the
right.
last currency probably to rule things. And blockchain technology is such a breakthrough in that, in the technological era that we're in, and having Bitcoin be kind of the golden standard of crypto, if you will, from my
Yeah.
understanding. Like this is the hallmark of what would be the most logical future currency. So like I totally get on board with that, and I think with the technology and just the creation of blockchain and bitcoins, like I think that legitimizes it in a lot of ways. Personally, I think it is speculative because,
Hmm.
it's just ones and zeros out there in the world, in the ethos in some way.
Yep.
Um, but that's no different than my bank that I can get cash out of. It's ones and zeros in there, and everybody has my money until I go there and ask to withdraw. And then they're like, oh, yeah, here's your money that we've been holding. No, like it's just been out there, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing. And you never know like when something really strange could happen to our economic system, is because they are ones and zeros. What if there was a crash, a major crash of some sort, doomsday,
Yeah.
when it comes to the financial, or some gridlock and you can't get your finances, or that's not unfathomable. It might never happen, but there's a possibility. And if that were to happen, Bitcoin would go from Bitcoin, like what it is, to like everybody would be like, it would change overnight. And and everyone that didn't
Yeah.
know or had anything against Bitcoin would then instantly become an adopter, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it would really bring things to light. So hopefully that doesn't
Hmm.
happen. But if something strange like that were to happen, I think it would legitimize it. But even in the past few years, like the government's gotten on board with it, and they're now regulating it, right? With the taxes, like in a way
Bitcoin.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and everything, which is frustrating because the whole core of cryptocurrency is to remove government centralization of it. So that's a whole other tangent, probably for another podcast. But the government found its way to bring some regulation to it.
Hmm.
Um, but at the heart of it, it's independent, freely independent, and so I like that. That's a cool
Hmm.
idea. Um,
So, if you
but
don't mind me
kind
asking,
of going.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you don't mind me asking, why do you think blockchain technology is revolutionary, and why do you think the government regulating it is a sign of a lack of um, decentralization and
So
policy, etc.,
blockchain,
from government?
yeah. So I'll try and explain kind of my rationale
Right.
for what I was just mentioning. So blockchain technology, from my understanding, it's a highly advanced technology that can be used in a lot of different platforms that we probably just haven't even realized it's applicable to. And I don't know a whole lot about it. Again, I just know kind of skim a surface, but from my understanding, there's probably a lot of other platforms that technology itself could be applied to and be very useful, not just in the Bitcoin or possibly even cryptocurrency, but even like at large. I don't know what the applications of that would be like. I'm just not as well informed on that, but from my understanding, that technology and the complexity of it could be used for. I mean, like it could be used for like government coding. Yeah, I mean, like intelligence stuff. Like, I mean, there's so many things that it could be used for. Maybe every day, maybe not every day, but function in some capacity at a large scale. So from my understanding, that blockchain technology really puts it in a classification of its own, because the security, the built-in principle and structure of that security is very powerful, and could be used for some pretty cool things in the future. When it comes to money, uh, all governments are going to figure out a way of having control and a way of making money on that money, aka taxes. And so my understanding, the whole reason why cryptocurrency was developed was to have a uncentralized form of currency removed from any government or state or country that's freely independent. And that's why it kind of was on the black market originally, or kind of its roots were from that. And it became this big thing. There's a lot of money behind this, and the government's going to want to regulate that. And so, with them putting it on your taxes, where you have to declare how much you've spent or purchased or whatever, they're able to regulate that and tax it. So it might not be passing through the federal government, but they're able to make money on it. They're able to put sanctions on it. They could also technically say it's not legal or whatever. Like, they can regulate, right? And so this thing then is regulated, and then they have control of what to do and what pathway to regulate this, and it's going to serve them as far as control and money. So I mean, that's the design of government. And they don't want the people to have the control over the money. They want that. So by design, they're going to create a way, which they have, and they've created a bunch of laws, from my understanding. This is like years ago that I went into the research on that, but there's a bunch of laws put into place to regulate this, because it was kind of like the Wild West in a lot of ways. And so they wanted to put some boundaries and parameters on it. So they did. And then, which was because at first they wanted to devalue cryptocurrency and basically say it wasn't a real thing. That was my gist initially. But then it got so big that they're like, oh, we've got to get some control over this somehow, which worked for them and against them, because they gained control, but then they legitimized cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, because now they're saying it's something. And so they actually made it become a form of real currency by trying to regulate it and like saying like, yeah, this is legit. And now a lot of institutions, banks, financial organizations, they see the value in this. And so um, everybody's in. now
Mhm.
now it's now it is much more regulated, and I feel like it kind of tainted the core, the foundation of what cryptocurrency is supposed to be. But they had the ability to do that, even in their own way, in the federal government's way of doing that, through taxes and yeah, so they were able to do that. But on another level, it did legitimize it and make it like valid. Like, they can't just ignore it. It's now here to stay. So I think it tainted it, but it also legitimized it in some ways. So
Yeah,
I don't know
everything's
how
trade-off.
that really. Yeah, there's some pros and cons within that, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
um,
well, I agree with a lot of those concerns of regulation and this and that, the other, but and you'd probably agree with this, but really that's, in my view, that's less of a criticism against Bitcoin. That's more of a criticism of the government trying to regulate it, right?
totally, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
comes
it's like the, yeah. But I see your point, right? It's like the captain of the sinking ship preventing people from going to lifeboats. The more they do that, the more it's a sign to get the lifeboats, right? I think probably the thing with clarifying is blockchain and like what that is. You know, I get what you're saying. With that, and I think that maybe is a part of the concern of the government getting involved is maybe then they can control that. But actually, blockchain is the precise opposite of what you're describing. It's actually not super complicated. I mean, to most people, including me, it's pretty complicated. But actually it's an extremely simple database, because everything is transparent, or at least it's supposed to be, um, and shared. And so actually, it's extremely um, simple. It's not really that secure, actually. The thing that
Oh,
makes yeah, the thing that makes it secure is how it's done, right? So blockchains have existed since the 80s, but the problem is that what has been the use, right? If I'm going to store everything on a database, you're going to store everything on a database, and we're going to store that on a blockchain that you and I validate. It's not very efficient. It would be more efficient just to have me store all the data and verify what is what, right? Via my authority, right? And so uh, blockchains never really made a lot of sense, because it's like, okay, you and I are trying to agree on something, but we're just both throwing our data in this ether, this digital space, and it's more work to do that than to just have a trusted centralized ledger. And so it never really made a lot of sense. But what Bitcoin did, or what the people that made Bitcoin did, was that they found a way to do that without us having to rely on each other, right? If we had Luke and Stephen blockchain, I'm putting in my data, you're putting in your data, it's less efficient. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And instead, one of us deciding to trust the other and just have it, right? But what Bitcoin did is that it found an algorithm, an equation, let's say, of incentives for people to do that and get paid to do that without having to trust each other in the process. And so I would say actually it's the opposite, that um, it's very
hmm.
hard to scale or use blockchains outside of that system, because how do you validate what other people say? This is what people call the two generals problem, or the there's different ways to describe it, but that's essentially the problem. And why, in my opinion, we haven't really seen um, blockchain scale that much, despite 45 years, basically half a century of computing, of it existing. It's extremely simple, and it doesn't communicate information effectively or efficiently, when you could just do that more efficiently with a centralized server. And so what makes Bitcoin different is that it requires an energy cost in order to have each next block of the chain. And that's where the electricity comes in. And so in my view, that's why the government getting involved is, um, I agree with the concerns that definitely regulating it and trying to stop it's a concern, but ultimately they can't stop it, because the only way to take over Bitcoin, let's say, is to spend more electricity. And this gets back to the earlier point about why it's so hard to reproduce. It's very easy to reproduce um, Bitcoin. I mean, it's just information, open source, sitting on the internet. Like, you can just do, Command C, Command V, right? Copy paste, right? You can copy it an infinite number of times, so it's very easy to copy. But the electricity that goes into each block, that secures it, not the blockchain itself, but the energy pouring into that, is very difficult to reproduce, and only more expensive to reproduce. So anyway,
Hmm.
just a slightly different
Interesting.
perspective on it, maybe different than what you've heard,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's what's called proof of work versus proof of stake. Proof of work is basically, I guess, in simple speak, proof of work is basically each next block of the blockchain is secured by electricity, by energy, right? Work meaning uh, energy that some computer somewhere has to um, flip virtual coins, let's say, to get in that next block. And proof of stake is the model, like I was describing before. It's a blockchain, but Luke gets a say, Stephen gets a say, and another 50 people get a say. That would be proof of stake, where how secure the next block is dependent upon the people involved giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down, right? And so, like you were saying with banking before, I agree with you. The banking is just ones and zeros also. I agree with that. And that I think we could call a non-blockchain proof of stake system, right? You have JP Morgan, US Treasury, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, right? You have these different nodes, these different people or boards of people, and each of them have a say in how many dollars are made, where do the dollars go, is this ledger correct, is that bank correct, right? Basically, they are the entities that validate or deny what's correct and false. And so anyway, we actually don't, in my opinion, we don't need a blockchain for that. It's much more efficient between those individuals just for them to, on a centralized database, communicate with each other. The only
Mm.
real use for blockchain, in my view, is for converting that electricity, which nobody centrally controls, into a series of numbers on the screen. So, um, anyway, for all that to say, I guess that'd be my perspective on it. And I think, again, that's kind of what makes Bitcoin pretty different, is that um, unlike most systems, no matter how much you reproduce Bitcoin, you can't reproduce the electricity, right? I can copy a bank statement and, fraudulently pretend I'm me, because proof of stake is based on who you are, right? If I can go to a bank and say, "Oh, I'm Luke Broyles," then I could take my own money, right? Or if I was a bad guy, I could take Luke's money, right? But if it's based on electricity, that's a very different question. So anyway, bit of a different take on it, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Interesting, yeah, because that,
yeah.
yeah, from my understanding, like the blockchain technology was really revolutionary, like in its own way. I
Well,
think
it
it had been
is.
around, you mentioned it had been around for a long time, but was it Yokomoto or there was
Nakamoto, yeah.
someone, from my understanding, there was someone who is not identifiable that kind of put this into, you know, a different atmosphere,
Yeah.
applied it in some unique way that has created kind of what we're now talking about. But again, I'm amateur here, man. I don't know a whole lot about it.
That's
I know
okay.
enough to
Yep.
get confused on things for sure.
Yep.
But
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's perfectly all right. Because to see, most people want to say it's complicated. Um, because, oh, it's complicated. Believe me, trust me, give me a bunch of money so I can invest in it. Right? Yeah,
yeah,
the people that want to convince other people to give them money to invest in it need to give the impression that this is complicated and only I can understand it, and I'm smart enough to do it, right? Um,
yeah,
so it's an extremely common narrative that, oh, this is very complicated, but yeah, actually,
it's
I
more
would argue
simple.
it. Yeah, actually, I'd argue it's the opposite, right? Um,
Okay.
and actually, it's what you want. So you've surely heard of AI. I know you're not that deep under a rock, maybe. Not there's anything bad with that. Um,
Unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's I think that's an important point. I guess just to expand a bit more, if it was complicated and if you could get more bitcoins or control more bitcoins as a function of being smarter or having the better computer, the faster computer, then the government's entrance would be a big problem because the government has bigger computers and faster computers. And so, if you could control Bitcoin by having a smarter computer, because it's complicated, and by finding the most efficient way to get more Bitcoin, right? Then that'd be a problem if the government's involved, right? And then artificial intelligence would be the even bigger problem because if you have some sort of AI or quantum computer or whatever that is smarter than everyone else, well, then they would become the new government, right? They would become the new government of Bitcoin, at least, right? And so that actually is why it's really important that blockchain, in this case Bitcoin, is extremely simple because you can't outsmart something that's simple, right? So Bitcoin and Bitcoin's miners, Bitcoin's blockchain actually, believe it or not, is quite literally a series of endless coin flips. So the miners, the computers, um, mining Bitcoin, hashing Bitcoin, it's essentially a series of virtual coin flips, bits between 0 and 1, like you were saying before, right? Binary. uh, binary hexadecimal, and it, does that hundreds of trillions of times a second. And that's
Hmm.
essentially what it is. Electricity is spent to flip from 1 to 0, and that simplicity is really important for that reason. That if we do not want a large government or a rich billionaire or a AI bot of the future to come along, be a bit faster than everyone else, and suddenly, quote unquote, hack the algorithm and take everyone's money or destroy everyone's money, right? Um,
Hmm.
so anyway, hopefully it's interesting, but I think that's important to mention because that's a big part of why Bitcoin is so difficult to reproduce because no matter how smart you get, um, like technology wise, like we just don't have the tech. We don't know how we could make more Bitcoin, even if we had quantum computers. Like we
Yeah,
don't know how to make
yeah.
more. Yeah, the only
Let
way we
me
know how to make
interrupt
more.
you.
No, please
Is
please
there
do.
there was made one time they made like whatever there's always been the same amount of Bitcoin, and what is it, like 100
Correct.
million coins or something? Yeah,
21
that's
million.
like,
Yeah,
there you go. All right,
yeah,
so yeah,
correct,
okay, right on.
correct. Right.
Um, yeah. So
Yeah,
so yeah.
so 21 million Bitcoin. You know, if this is probably a good place to wrap up, but if computers continue to survive, and if um, people and the bots and AIs and whatever we make um, continue to want commodities, the one that's the most difficult to make is Bitcoin. Um, and then the only question becomes, how much to buy, right? And how long to hold it, what to do with it, right? I'd say just hold on to it, don't touch it. And with 21 million Bitcoin, 21 million is a big number, but um, if only more and more people are going to use it, then pretty obviously most people are never going to have um, a whole Bitcoin or even part of a whole Bitcoin. But to me, the exciting thing is that, with fiat money, the incentive is get as close to you can as the fiat printer, right? Because the dollar is essentially a proof of stake blockchain. Where you have the government, you have the lobbyists, you have central bank, all that stuff. It's essentially proof of stake blockchain, just without the fancy tech. Um, and so the incentive is get as close as you can to the lobbyists, to Washington D.C., to get as much control, so you can get more stimulus for you, more checks for you, and less for everyone else, because that's a zero sum game that's in your benefit, right? But with Bitcoin, being proof of work, being based on how much energy are you willing to produce, um, it's kind of like going out for a hunt, and that the more days you go out for a hunt, the more moose you catch, the more bears you get, the more whatever you're hunting you get, right? Um,
Hmm.
and so if that is the case, if that's the incentive, then the incentive is how do we build as much productivity as possible? How do we build as much stuff as possible so we can get as much Bitcoin as fast as possible, right? So it shifts that. Right now, the most efficient way to get more dollars is become a lobbyist or, get close to some banking or government sector. Um, but the incentive on a money that can only be acquired via energy is produce more energy, right? Get more energy, get more electricity, build more stuff, serve more people, and so that's kind of the hope. And to me, that's my assumption. What's going to happen is that Bitcoin um, is going to be worth more, but less so because Bitcoin is going up, but more so that we're producing more stuff um, in relation to that Bitcoin. And if that's the case, um, then most people will never have 1 Bitcoin. Most people never have 10 Bitcoin, half a Bitcoin, a tenth of a Bitcoin, a hundredth of a Bitcoin, even a well, a thousandth of a Bitcoin. I guess gets kind of reasonable, but it's a very very small number, right? 21 million Bitcoin for many people. So um, anyway, there's a lot more directions I could go, but yeah, long story
Yeah.
short is that that'd be the way I put it. Is that you know Bitcoin is basically electricity money, um, and
Hmm.
that's why it's important to secure it, because a lot of other people are going to want that, including the AIs. So um, anyway, I don't know if I've
Interesting.
answered questions or only brought up the
Yeah,
core
no,
point.
you've answered them and more. Yeah, I've never heard of it, thought about that way, but it's a currency of energy or electricity. I'll have
Right.
to meditate on that one. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Very
I
cool.
think I think in the future most electricity is going to be feeding AI data centers or Bitcoin miners. Um,
Yeah,
one being centralized, the other being decentralized. But I think that's probably the best way to put it. Your friend, what was his name, Dave from work many years ago. I don't know if he
yeah,
was into mining at all, but that's why there's so many computers chasing Bitcoin. It's because that's the only way to get more is by spending a bunch of electricity. So anyway, for me, that's a speculation. I speculate in the future. People are going to want electricity. The other way I sometimes put it for people, which is it's still a metaphor, but I think it's a useful metaphor, is that Bitcoin is basically an algorithm at which we can turn electricity into a commodity, right? Because you can't really store or transact electricity unless you have a battery, right? But the problem with the battery is that it might lose 2% of its charge a month, right? It might die after 5 years or whatever, right? Plus, they're really
hmm
expensive. Plus, you got to transport them. And so all of a sudden, it becomes like a far inferior version of gold. It has all the downsides of gold. It's expensive. It's hard to move. Everything else, analog. But it's even worse because, unlike, gold doesn't just magically lose 2% of its energy every, few weeks, months, depending on how good the battery is, right? And so I think a useful metaphor is to think of Bitcoin that way. That what makes Bitcoin special is less so the blockchain, but what makes it special is that the blockchain is a small part of a larger algorithm that basically represents a portion of the world's electricity. So owning one Bitcoin there, in that metaphor, owning one Bitcoin would be owning 1/21 millionth of the world's electricity, theoretically, if we denominated electricity in Bitcoin. Because right now we have nothing to denominate electricity in other than dollars, but we print more dollars. Um, so anyway, I often joke to people that the only two speculations or the only two assets that make sense anymore are Bitcoin. If you're the optimist and assume humans have more computers that need more electricity in the future, and then the other side is the guns and ammo and the doomsday bunker. Um, because we're not staying where we are, right? Either the world's going to get better or it's going to get worse. And so, so anyway, that's yeah. I tell people buy Bitcoin, get it a multi-sig, and get some guns and food. I guess. Um, but
I can
anyway,
imagine
I hope
what
I
you
hope
get a lot of dehydrated, freeze-dried meals in your basement,
yeah,
ready,
maybe
ready
not.
for. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm generally an optimist, mostly. Some days I'm not,
yeah,
but
I hear you.
mostly I am. So, yeah. Well, Stephen, I
Awesome.
don't want to keep you too long. Thanks for joining. A part of this is we're going to give you, or I'm going to give you $50 of Bitcoin for your time. I can't remember if I told you that or
Oh,
not, but
awesome.
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. I know
Cool,
you've got a
man.
bit already. So there you go. This is your first buy or your first stack in,
Yeah.
years, apparently. Hopefully that will get you learning more as a soon to be family man. And
Yep.
yeah, I don't know if you have any questions, thoughts to add. I have one more question if you don't have anything to add. Um,
No, I
as you wrap that
appreciate
up.
it, and hopefully, some of the um, questions I asked or thoughts I had, or even disproven, or or otherwise, were helpful to somebody else. So,
Yeah.
thank you, Luke, for offering to have me on here and ask some questions. It was fun. This is my first podcast, so here we go. First one in the wrap. This is probably your hundredth, thousandth. You're
Yeah,
getting noticed and recognized at the claims at airports. I'm
at
not there yet.
airports.
This is my first one. But I do get recognized as Messi at Costco. So the soccer player,
Oh, really?
people think, oh yeah, man. Yeah, a lady and her
People
whole
think you're
family
messy.
came up for
That's funny.
autographs. Yeah, and I told her I was like, no, I'm not Messi, and she like she would not take it. Like, yeah, man. So
Oh, that's just what he'd say.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Of course you're not. Of
So
course you're not. I get it. I get it. Sign the hat or whatever. Yeah. That's funny. Yep.
awesome, Luke. Well, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, Stephen. My last question would be if you've learned anything or have any idea, why would you say maybe Bitcoin is better than what we have currently or what just whatever's in your mind. What would be either a partial thought or full thought? Why do you think Bitcoin is better, or at least has the potential to be better um, than the world as it
Then
is
cash.
currently? Yeah.
Yeah. Technology, just being, we're already on a system of ones and zeros and debit cards, and I think Bitcoin is more streamlined with that than cash, right? Even if you go to like a farmer's market, you're probably using some Squarespace with the credit card. Most people just don't use cash anymore. They don't carry it, things like that. So, um, I'm not sure why Bitcoin would be better necessarily, but it seems to be more technically advanced than cash. I don't know if that's required. Like, I don't know if that has much bearing, but we'll find out one day at a time. We'll see how this thing unveils itself. So it'll be interesting to see.